Welcome to the Raw Footage Oscar Preview 2022, a series of videos where I'll be going through the major categories and giving my opinions on what I think will win, what I think should win, and the many cases in which I think the Oscars got it wrong and films were either snubbed or I just personally preferred other material. This is the video for the Best Documentary feature category, and this is one of the categories for which the Academy publishes a shortlist. They released a list of 15 films that were shortlisted for this category, and all the nominees and my personal alternative nominations will be coming from that 15 film shortlist. This does mean that there are many documentary films which were on the eligible list published by the Academy, but did not make that final 15 film shortlist. Many of them I have seen and do recommend, and you can see some of those films playing on this video. But my personal alternative nominations will be coming from that 15 film shortlist that was published by the Academy. This is one of those films that it is notoriously difficult to predict. Even seemingly very high profile films don't make the cut, and some films you've never ever heard of do. It's something of a lottery, and it is something that it is easy to have very different opinions on, and I certainly do. So here are my thoughts on this year's actual nominees for documentary feature.
Nominee.
Ascension is a documentary made by a half-Chinese American director and is an experiential documentary with lots of montages telling the tale of Chinese industriousness and work ethic, and the ways that Chinese society has created a mass of worker ants, essentially, creating the world's products and living in a very restrictive regime. Personally speaking, I am not a fan of this particular kind of experiential documentary with no context, just a series of dreamlike images. I don't particularly like that type of documentary, and even on the 15 film shortlist, I think there was another film which much better demonstrated Chinese culture and society, and I will be talking about that later. So, not particularly my kind of thing, and personally speaking, I didn't include Ascension as one of my nominees.
Nominee.
Attica is a hard-hitting, protesting documentary telling the tale of one of the worst prison riots in US history in the 1970s. It is a blistering evisceration of police brutality, of the indignities of the prison system, of the ways that prisoners are seen as less than human, particularly if, as is the case in so much of America, the majority of the prisoners are black. And at this particular period in 1970s, there were no non-white prison officers in Attica prison. So things were bound to get tense. And yeah, it's a harrowing, horrible film about police brutality and violence, but at the end of the day, it is just a documentary which is majoritively made of talking heads, and I think as a piece of filmmaking there were better choices. So powerful and hard-hitting, but Attica did not make my personal list of nominees.
Nominee.
Flee is a documentary I've already talked about in many of my other videos. I think it is one of the best films released in this particular Oscar cycle, but I didn't actually give it my win in this particular category. I've talked about it many, many times in other categories. I thoroughly enjoyed it, thoroughly recommend it. But for this particular category, I wanted to highlight something else. Highlight something which is a bit more positive rather than the rather harsh truths demonstrated in Flea. So the animated foreign language documentary Flea is going to win in many other categories, but speaking personally, it didn't win for me in this particular race.
Nominee.
Writing with Fire is an Indian documentary which tells the story of the only newspaper which is run by women in India. And not only women, Dalit women, so-called untouchable women, the lowest of the low in the caste system which is still disturbingly relevant in modern-day India. So not only are these women journalists, these are the low-born women who are making a difference in the Uttar Pradesh region of northern India. It's a powerful, uplifting story telling the tale of women being self-determined, the transition from print media to online media as so much of journalism has transitioned, and also telling the tale of increased Hindu nationalism in India and the disturbing policies and the effect it has on Indian society of Narendra Modi. So, a film about feminism, a film about nationalistic politics, and uplifting to boot. Yes, Writing with Fire is an excellent documentary, and I do thoroughly recommend it. I do think it deserved this nomination.
Snubbed.
In the same breath is a film made by the documentarian Nanfu Wang, who is Chinese-born and American-based, and previously directed the Oscar shortlisted documentary One Child Nation, which is excellent. And this tells the story of the COVID pandemic from within and without China. Nanfu Wang, having family still in China and regularly visiting China, but living in America and being married to an American, she can see the story from both sides, and in the same breath is a vicious takedown of the nationalistic policies which made the COVID-19 pandemic so much worse than it needed to be. The authoritarian crackdown that China had at the beginning of the pandemic was a terrible, terrible decision, and Nanfu Wang is in the perfect position to tell that story. And she tells it brilliantly, with a unique perspective showing both sides of the argument, the Chinese response and the American response to the pandemic, and how it was so much worse than it needed to be. In the same breath is a powerful, revelatory documentary and a really strong piece of work. Given the current circumstances, I'm kind of surprised this didn't actually make a nomination, but it was on the 15 film shortlist, and for me, it definitely deserved a nomination as Best Documentary Feature this Oscar cycle.
Snubbed.
Procession is the documentary that I personally am most upset didn't make the final 5 nominees. I think this is an immensely powerful and immensely inventive documentary. Directed by Robert Greene, who has previously brought us the excellent hybrid documentary Kate Plays Christine, this is another hybrid documentary which deals with survivors of sexual abuse by Catholic priests who, as adult men, as part of their therapy, as part of their healing process, go through the process of making short films which deal with their abuse. The use of drama therapy, the use of working together as a group in order to get past their traumas, in order to deal with the horrific things which were done to them by Catholic priests, dealing with the almost complete indifference of the Catholic Church at large to their traumas, to their horrors. It's a powerful piece of work showing the healing process. And I had the experience watching Procession that at least some of these men, there are 6 men who make these short films as part of their healing process. At least some of these men seem to be genuinely helped. They have genuinely made progress in their psychological makeup by simply participating in this film. It is a film about the power of healing. It is a film about filmmaking, about the creative process. It filters the horrors that these men faced through the prism of art, and I think it is an outstanding piece of work. I really do recommend it. And considering it is on Netflix, I kind of expected this to make the final 5 nominees, but it ended up not happening. But do check out Procession if you feel you can stomach it. It is a powerful and inventive and an intense documentary, which I do think deserved a nomination as Best Documentary Feature this year.
Will win. Should win.
What I think will win this category is also what I have decided should win this category. Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised. I've already talked a lot about the documentary Flea, including giving it a Best Picture nomination this year. I do think in many ways it is a superior film to Summer of Soul, but when you are talking about the Oscars, and particularly when you are talking about the documentary category, there are 2 directions you can go in. Do you go in the harsh, brutal, powerful directions of something like The Act of Killing, or do you go for the uplifting, the moving, the heartwarming directions of something like 20 Feet from Stardom? And ultimately I decided I'm going to be talking a lot about Flea in these preview videos, so I will give my Best Documentary Feature win to Summer of Soul, which is one of the most joyful experiences I had in the cinema in 2021. Documenting the 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival, a series of concerts which were held in Mount Morris Park in Harlem in the summer of 1969, the same summer as Woodstock. As these concerts were taking place, man landed on the moon. So this film shows all the footage that was shot at the time, with the intention that eventually it would be shown on television, but nobody was interested. So these tapes from 1969 sat gathering dust for decades until, of all people, Questlove, Amir Questlove Thompson, got his hands on these tapes and turned it into an awesome documentary. This is probably one of the best concert movies you will ever see, with performances from people like Gladys Knight, Stevie Wonder, The Fifth Dimension, Sly and the Family Stone, Nina Simone giving the first public performance of Young, Gifted and Black. Pretty much any black artist that was active in 1969 is in these concerts, and the footage is amazing. This is probably the best concert footage you will ever see, but it also manages to put the film in cultural context, with man landing on the moon, something which was not universally appreciated by the black community, the use of the word black rather than Negro was starting to become relevant at this period in time. This was only a year after the assassination of Martin Luther King, with the civil rights movement at its height. The fact that Harlem was starting to be devastated by the ravages of heroin. Putting everything in the cultural context, as well as having this amazing music footage. I think Questlove managed to do everything all together. He managed to make a brilliant, uplifting concert movie and a socially conscious film about the civil rights movement. And it all works together so well. Nothing overpowers anything else. It all works in concert, as the concerts work in concert. And it's a brilliant, wonderful, heartwarming, uplifting film. And I do think it deserves the win it's almost certainly going to get as Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars. Flea might have my harsher art house appreciation, but for sheer joy, I think Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, is a brilliant documentary and deserves to win the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature.
Best Documentary.
So the nominees for Best Documentary Feature at the 2022 Oscars are Ascension, Attica, Flea, Summer of Soul, and Writing with Fire. In my personal choices, I would take out Ascension and Attica and put in the same breath, and Procession. What I think will win is also what I've decided should win in this particular category. We need a little bit of positivity, and Summer of Soul definitely demonstrates that. A heartwarming, brilliant, uplifting film, and sometimes you need that. So I do think that Summer of Soul should win and will win the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. So that brings this video to a close, and as I leave you with another list of honourable mentions that were on the 15 film shortlist for this category, you can like, comment, subscribe. You can listen to my audio podcast if that is your thing. And all that remains for me to say is see you next time, where I shine a light on cinema, both obvious and obscure.
Ah!